subject. So, what are the objectives of this pharmaceutical analysis? We will learn about what is pharmaceutical analysis, mainly what is this subject, then its definition and scope. Then we will also learn in these various techniques like titration and electrochemical methods, develop how to develop an analytical method. And if you are working in a kind of industries, then drugs we are using, they should pass different pharmaceutical analytical methods for proving their quality and insurance for quality assurance purpose. Then for new drugs, how you are going to develop any analytical method. Then we will also understand the principle of volumetric and electrochemical analysis, which are mainly topics that are introduced in this course. So first about term of pharmaceutical analysis. In this, we have two terms. One is pharmaceutical and one is analysis. So analysis first, let's take term analysis. What does it mean? Analysis means analyzing, or you can say we are some observations we are recording. So we are studying composition and quality control. In this, we can use two terms like quality control and quality insurance. Let's take example from normal life. First example is milk. For example, you have purchased milk and then you are consuming, but you come to know that you are not satisfied with the quality of this milk. So you can say there was a excess amount of water in the milk. It means you are analyzing the milk. Then you come to know that it contains large amount of water. It means ultimately you can say quality of milk is low. So analysis means you are determining the quality of any product. Another example we can take air. So we say what percentage of oxygen, nitrogen, or carbon dioxide present in the air. So how we will come to know what is the percentage of these components in the air? By analysis. We are analyzing, we are taking samples, you can say from the air for a particular area. Then we are analyzing in the lab and we can will say that this much amount of or this much percentage of oxygen is present, then this much percentage of carbon dioxide is present, and this much amount of nitrogen is present in the air. So it means we are performing analysis. Then again, another example we can take from surroundings like soil analysis. So you are working in farming fields. So you take samples of soil and send it to lab. Then we will come to know how much amount of metals, heavy metals, is present in the soil, or are there any pesticidal amounts or residues are present which can harm our farming. So ultimately, what will be the effect of those? It will be on the basis of analysis. And you can also take another examples like water analysis, water sampling, and then its analysis. Is it drinkable or not? You can choose any normal examples from surroundings. So we are in daily life, we are performing different kind of analysis. Second term is pharmaceutical. So that is our subject, pharmaceutical analysis. What does pharmaceutical means? So it means relating to drugs that we are consuming for in any ailment or any disease condition, and chemicals associated with their manufacturing. And what means any excipients or APIs that are associated in manufacturing of these drugs or their dosage form. So let's say take example of paracetamol tablets. So we will say there is 500 mg paracetamol tablet. So what does that mean? Is it containing only 500 mg paracetamol? No, it is also containing some excipients that are used in formulation of these tablets. So if you will weigh this tablet, it will be weigh around 600 to or more mg. So there is 500 mg paracetamol. What are other 100 mg things? These are excipients. So we have to perform its analysis. Then we will come to know there is 500 mg paracetamol is present or not. Then what are other excipients present? That we will come to know from analysis. So for this analysis, we have to follow different analytical methods, different techniques. You can say titrations, chromatographic techniques. These are all associated with pharmaceutical analysis. So I hope you understand what term meaning of this word pharmaceutical analysis. So if we are going to its definition, now scientific definition, what does it include? What does it say? Pharmaceutical analysis is branch of practical chemistry. So it is associated with practical techniques that we are going to perform in analysis or mainly QA and QC department of industries that involves series of process for identification. So first thing, identification means we have to identify which components are present. If we want to know, for example, in milk, We want to know there is urea content in the milk. It is present or not. So we will come to know from analysis. We are performing identification of that component. Then determination means if present, if we are identifying present, then how much amount is present, that is also comes under quantification. So you can say we have to quantify. Then purification. So if there is mixture, for example, we are using natural products as a medicine from a long time. So we are using it in herbal forms or we are using a crude product. But you want to know what is the active constituent of this formulation and you want to identify those, then means you have to take that particular substance or particular constituent separately. It is purification technique. So for purification, we have to perform chromatography. So we are purifying the mixture from a to get our single constituent or a single active constituent. Similarly, in organic or you can say synthetic drugs, after reactions, when we are synthesizing API, there is a mixture of chemicals. It is not always 100% only API that we are manufacturing. So to pure that, we have to perform some purification techniques. These purification techniques are again part of pharmaceutical analysis. So purification of substance, then separation means if there is mixture, two different things are present, you have to get these two things separately. Both are required, that is separation. So for example, you are containing a solution of sodium chloride in water, you have to get water and sodium chloride differently. So you can evaporate water, okay, then you can condense it, it will you will get water at one side and sodium chloride will be there as it. So this is separation from a solution or mixture. Then another techniques like instrumental methods will be there. It is determination of structure of chemical compounds. So whatever you are synthesizing, whatever you are producing or products that are in chemical structures. So we have to identify like you using UV, NMR, IR. So different instrumental methods which can prove that our this compound has this formula and this one is its structure. So there are techniques which all comes under pharmaceutical analysis. Or other definition you can say, it involves application of analytical procedures. Now we have covered all this identification, determination, quantification and purification, right? But analytical procedure means all these procedures for identification we have to use different procedure, for determination we have to use different kind of procedure, quantification means some there are standard procedures. So all these things will be known as analytical procedure, which are a part of pharmaceutical analysis. So it involves application of these procedures, or you can say analytical procedure, to determine the purity, safety, and quality of drugs and chemicals. How? So if there is drug we are using, it is pure or not. If it contains some other impurities, they can have toxic effect or some adverse effect on our body. So we should have get pure drug. We can use this procedure to determine if drug is how much pure. So according to some standards, we need more than 99.5% drug pure. In some cases, like insulin or penicillin that are antibiotics we are using, we need highly pure drug in limited dose. That's why we have to perform their analysis. Then safety, for example, if there are some toxic effects, toxic substances present in the formulation, they can give some adverse effect on our body. So we will have to perform safety studies. These are also part of analytical procedure. Some, for example, you can say drug is deteriorating or decomposing. It will produce some side products that are also toxic. So for measurement of those side products, we will perform analytical procedure. Then quality of drugs. Again, that is we are determining purity and their stability. And with these about drugs, and then the various chemicals which are associated with in this process manufacturing of different doses. Pharmaceutical analysis, you can say, is integral or you can say most important part of pharmaceutical industry, because whenever you are introducing a drug to the market, you need to pass this formulation or drug from various analytical procedures for its purity, its safety, and its stability. So that's where we come. This pharmaceutical analysis comes into the scope. So every industry we need an analyst which will test this formulation at different steps. Okay, so that we will come to know that this formulation we are making is stable or not, is pure or not, or is it passing the standards which are according to the regulatory requirement or not. So that's why we can say, for let's take example, for example, industries like Ross, Pfizer. So they are, you can say, highly reputed industries. Why they are highly reputed? Because of their high quality products and their safety of their drugs, you can say. How they are ensuring that their products or tablets are of or their other formulations are of high quality via this pharmaceutical analysis that is performed in quality control and quality insurance section, which is known as QC and QA. So this is integral part of pharmaceutical industry, not only in research but even pharma manufacturing. So even small scale companies where third party manufacturing is done also, it is also important part there. So every other industries which are, these are incomplete without this department, and no use without any analysis. So you can't use, if you are making tablets, solutions, you can't use these things without performing analysis, because you don't know if these are pure or not, if these are safe or not. So for that you have to perform analysis. So that's analyst, you can say, or pharmaceutical analyst. They have huge scope in analytical method development and routine stability analysis at research centers of all pharma organization. So for example, you can say you are introducing a new product in the market. So let's, you can say, develop a new formulation or new drug we are going to introduce in the market. So how you can introduce it in the market? Before you have to perform analysis for its quality and its safety. But it is a new drug, you don't have already established method. So that's why we have to develop a method. That's where comes analyst in the scope, because they have to work on that drug or molecule and develop a method for that new molecule intently. Now, so this is for new. If there is already stay a drug present in the market that we are synthesizing batch wise batch in the industry, in manufacturing industries. So for their stability and for their quality, we have to again perform analysis repeatably for every batch, for every step. So here also analysts come in the scope, because there is a requirement of analyst in each industry. Either you are developing method or either you are performing routine studies where you are synthesizing any formulation batch wise. So we have to, there is scope of analyst in each organization in QC and QA department. So scope of this pharmaceutical analysis subject. The importance of this analytical chemistry lies in the fact that it is a foundation pillar of entire procedure of drug discovery. How this is foundation pillar of drug discovery, you can say, if you are going to first discover any drug, you should know about basic, from where you are going to start. Okay, so then you have to identify. So identification comes under pharmaceutical analysis. You have to identify its target, where it is going to bind. That again thing that comes under analysis, because if you are identifying target, you will perform different analytical techniques or procedures. These are all part of pharmaceutical analysis. So you can say it is a foundation or basic, or you can say pillar or basic pillar of entire procedure of drug discovery, from where you are starting discovery of new drug molecules. Then isolation. Isolation again, if you are talking about natural products, for example, we are taking vincristine, vinblastine, anti-cancer drugs, which are produced from vinca plants. So again, you have to isolate these active constituents from the natural sources, their leaves or their stems. So in this case, you have to perform chromatographic techniques or different other isolation techniques, which are a part of pharmaceutical analysis. Then you are preparing solutions or other methods, then you have to perform their standardization. Standardization means you have to ensure that whatever you are producing is of uh, that quality or is of that concentration which you have mentioned in the method. So that thing is comes under standardization. And quality control, again, for any ensuring any quality of any product, any process, that you have to perform pharmaceutical analysis. So ultimately you can say, in whole chemistry, pharmaceutical analysis, simply analysis, you can say, is basic pillar from where we are starting. In case of pharmaceutical industries, pharmaceutical analysis is the foundation pillar of this whole process. So the basic importance of this pharmaceutical analysis is its utility in standardization and quality control of medicines and drug substances to ensure quality and stability of final product. So in industries where we are going to use for in standardization procedures, whatever we are going to use, then quality, which we are medicines which we are producing, or drug substances, any API if we are producing, or intermediates you can also include in this. So whatever we are going to use in the pharmaceutical industry, we have to ensure that that raw material, that final product, that intermediate, whatever we are synthesizing or purchasing, is of high quality, is stable. Okay, if it is at stable, and what conditions it is stable, and a final product that we are producing is stable at storage, so that for how much time we can store it and when we can use it. So all these studies are part of this pharmaceutical analysis in industries. So in other than pharmaceutical analysis, what are different fields in which we are going to use this analytical techniques, like biological sample estimation? So where we are going to use this biological sample estimation? So you can take example of any you can say test, pathological test which we are performing. So you are taking blood samples, like you can say in case of diabetes you have to determine level of sugar in your blood, right? So we are taking blood sample, then we are determining using any analytical method what is the level of sugar in our blood. So it is a biological sample estimation, or biological sample for any disease condition we can determine what is the level of different proteins or different chemicals inside our system. Then food determination. How in food, if in food we have to determine what is the amount of residual pesticides, insecticides which is included our food, because in farming we are using different pesticides. So in food determination, or you can say in food analysis, we can use this techniques. Then in dairy product estimation, what is the fat? Simple dairy, you are going to put milk in the dairy, then you will the person will say that is the amount of fat in your sample. So that is again a technique of analysis in which by which you are going to determine the fat content in the milk. Similarly, you can determine any other content in the milk. Soil study, that I have already given example to you in the first, when we were studying about definition of pharmaceutical analysis. So you are going to give samples, send samples to the labs, then you are performing its analysis, and you will come to know this land is farming land or not, and how much irrigation is possible, how much irrigation is required at this land. Then if there are amount of you can say heavy metals is present or not, which can affect that our farming. Then forensic determination. Forensic means you are using some lab samples from case studies, and all you have watched CID and other you can say criminal episodes in which we are performing forensic analysis. So samples are sent to the forensic labs. They determine which kind of poison is taken, or which other body fluids they determine which are present, which can cause the death or other effects in the body. Then again, pesticide estimation in food and vegetable, like already I said, in food determination, we have to determine different pesticide amount or pesticide residual which can come to our food and vegetables during farming, which we are using. Then other insecticides which can be part of our food chain. Then environment pollutant determination. So to determine the you can say index of our air, it is safe or not. So we are taking a sample from our environment of air, then we will tell this much amount of this toxic is present in the air, so is it safe or not. So all these things, all these fields where we are introducing our pharmaceutical analysis. So in every field at plant, we need analyst that is required in documentation and performing analysis in quality control and stability studies. So apart from this, there is significant role in regulatory requirement or regulatory department of pharmaceutical companies to check analytical part of documents which needs to be submitted to regulatory authorities. Means if we are going to apply for approval of drug or new formulation, so there are some regulatory requirements in which we have to show this our formulation is passing this analytical test or not, it is of acquired quality or not. So for that purpose, analyst is required in every each and every industry or company which is going to perform these analytical techniques and determine the quality. Then this will be passed by that analyst and submitted to the regulatory department for the approval. So different techniques which we are going to use in pharmaceutical analysis. So based on these types, these are mainly divided into two types. like qualitative and quantitative. So first one is qualitative analysis. What is qualitative analysis? This method is used for identification of chemical compounds. Means in this method, we are only going to determine if amount of these samples or chemicals is present or not. So this is identification technique. So these tests are performed to indicate whether substance or compound is present in sample or not. So it is only going to give you answer in yes or no, you can say. So it is present or not present. So that is a qualitative analysis of our samples. Second thing, quantitative analysis. So if present, how much amount of that chemical or sample is present. So this is a method used for determination of amount of sample. So it is a quantification technique or quantification analysis in which we are going to determine how much amount of that chemical or API that is present in our doses formulation and doses form a different formulation. So these techniques are mainly based on quantitative performance of suitable chemical reaction. Further, these quantitative techniques you can say be divided into different parts because we have to identify different kind of chemicals. So for each there will be specific test that will be a different analytical procedure. So these reactions mainly based on you can say some chemical reactions by which we are going to determine if this chemical is present, then how much amount of this chemical or this sample is present in the given sample. So it can be you can say divided, quantitative analysis can be divided into different parts like chemical methods in which we are going to perform some chemical reactions like volumetric and titrimetric methods, gravimetric methods, gasometric analysis. We are going to discuss these all methods one by one in further slides. Then there are some electrical methods in which we can use to determine potential or electric potential to determine the amount of these chemicals. Then instrumental methods. In this we are going to use some instruments that will tell about based about the concentration of these chemicals in our samples. Then some biological and microbiological methods we are going to use in this pharmaceutical analysis. So one by one we will discuss about these methods. So first let's start with chemical methods. So chemical methods again are divided into three parts that we have discussed in earlier slide like volumetric and titrimetric methods. Volumetric means we are measuring volume. So that's why we can say it is a volumetric method. So one chemical we are adding some other chemical, we are measuring how much volume of that chemical or solution we have added in that sample, and based on that we calculate how much amount of our chemical which we are going to determine is present in the sample. Other method is gravimetric method, means we are performing its we are determining weight. We are having some precipitates and we will weight it. So then is gasometric, in which we are producing some gas which will be determined. Again, this volumetric method or titrimetric method we can say is again divided into different titrations like acid base titration. This that is you can say kind of neutralization reaction in which acid and base are neutralized to determine amount of each other, you can say, or vice versa. Then non-aqueous titration, the chemicals which are weak acid or base which are not going to give hydrogen ions or hydroxide ions in aqueous media. So in this case we can use non-aqueous titration. Then precipitation titration, in which we are going to precipitate when on addition of an you can say titrant. Then complexometric, in which we are going to use some metal chelating agents which will form complex with ligands. Then diazotization titration and redox titration. In diazotization we are forming diazo salt. In redox we are going to use oxidizing and reducing agents for some reactions which then we will determine their potential. So one by one these titration let's discuss. First one is titrimetric and volumetric method. So I have already told you it involves reaction of substance to be determined with an appropriate reagent as standard solution. So means a reaction of substance जिसको हमें determine करना है, that we are going to determine concentration of that sample. We will react it with a standard solution. We already have a standard solution. We will react it with that, and then the volume of that solution, standard solution, which will be used to this you can say react with this sample. From that we are going to estimate or you can say determine our amount of our chemical which that is present in the sample. So these volumetric methods require simple and these volumetric methods are very simple and require very less apparatus, and they are susceptible to also high accuracy, because if we are performing these titrations carefully, you can say, if we can perform you can determine exactly end point. So based on that, these methods will be highly accurate method for you can say analysis of chemicals. So these are different types: acid base, complexometric, precipitation, non-aqueous, diazotization, titration, oxidation, reduction, titration. So first one is acid base titration. So as I already told, this is a kind of neutralization reaction. When we are having acid and in a sample, we have to determine the amount of acid. We can use base as a standard solution, some base as a standard solution, and we are performing its neutralization. That how much amount of that base is used in neutralization, that you can say how much amount of acid is present in our sample. So ultimately this titration involves neutralization reaction between acid and base. So how this you can say titrations plays important role in quality control of pharmaceutical products. So there we have some reactions like HCl in aqueous media, it will give proton, so that's why it is acidic. Like nitric acid, it is going to again proton, and chlorine ions, negative ions of chloro and this nitro. So again like H2SO4, it is going to give two protons, two hydrogen ions. Then in case of base like NaOH, we have sodium hydroxide base, it is going to give Na positive and hydroxide and OH negative ion. Potassium hydroxide again, then ammonium hydroxide. So these are going to give hydroxide ion. Okay, you can also say these are acid or bases according to Arrhenius theory, that which are going to give proton in aqueous media, that is acid, which is going to give hydroxide ions in aqueous media, that is base. So it is a mainly neutralization reaction between those two. So when we have acid to determine, we are going to use base as standard. When we have to base to determine in a sample, we are going to use acid as our standard. So the process of acid-base titration or neutralization titration include all volumetric determination based on neutralization reaction. So as acid, we have to determine we are adding base, it will form salt and water. So based on this, we can determine our amount of acid or base present in the sample. So for example, here we have a standard solution of acid is used for quantitative determination of alkalis, or you can say base. So when we have to determine alkalis or basic solutions or samples, we can use standard solution of acid, and it's vice versa, like standard solution of base can be used for quantitative determination of acids. The reactions are carried out under standard volumetric titration conditions using indicator to detect the end point of titrations. Means how you are going to determine now your complete acid or base is neutralized by its you can say other acid or base. So in that case we will use some indicator, like if we are determining a base in sample, we have base solution in our conical flask, right? We are adding ace, but before adding acid, sorry, so what we will do, we will add a indicator, few drops of indicator. What will be this indicator? As soon as this media will be you can say basic sample that we are using, or we are going to determine, as soon as this will be completely neutralized, this indicator will give some color change. Based on that, we will say that our complete base is neutralized. So that's what is in the purpose of this indicator in this case, to determine the end point. So there are two terms, acidimetry and alkalimetry. So in this titration, you can say acid base titration, there are two terms. Acidimetry, it is a quantitative determination of alkali. Acidimetry means we are going to use standard solution of acid like HCl, H2SO4. In alkalimetry, we are going to use standard solution of base for determination of acid like sodium hydroxide and potassium hydroxide. In this subject, we are also going to cover this different titrations in detail also in module 2. So we can discuss there what kind of titration we can perform using this HCl, sulfuric acid, sodium hydroxide and KOH. Second type of titration is complexometric titration. Complexometric means formation of chelates or metal complexes, you can say.
So complexometric titration, also sometimes called chelatometry, is form of volumetric analysis in which the formation of colored complex is used to indicate the end point of titration. So what we are going to use, how we are performing this complexometric titration. So we have some ligands which can form complex with the metal. So we can take solution of that metal, or we can take solution of that ligands. So as soon as we are going to add this metal complex, so as soon as all the ligands will be complex, will form complex with this metal, and they will give some color change indication. So that is a complexometric titration. So complexometric titration are particularly useful for determination of mixture of different metal ions in solution. So for example, we have water solution, right? So we have to just determine how much amount of particular metal is present, heavy metal is present in this solution or not. So we can use some ligands which can form complex with that metal. So as soon as we are adding some ligand, it will keep forming complex with that metal line. Then as soon as whole metal will be consumed, it will give some color change. So it is a, you can say, form complex completely. So this complex is a mixture of metal ion plus ligand that is going to bind to these metal ions. These metal ions may be electrically positive, or this total complex, you can say, may be electrically positive, negative, or neutral also. So metal ions are Lewis acids and ligands are Lewis base in this case. So these are going to form a kind of neutralize each other and will form a complex. Ligands are electron pair donor and form coordinated covalent bonds with metal chelane in complexometric titration. So we can show like this one. Here we have, in this case, there is one metal complex and these are ligands which are forming complex with this metal ions. It will look like this metal complex if you are forming its analysis using instruments. So there are two terms in complexometric titration which you will have to understand. First one is chelate. A chelate is produced, it means a complex, you can say, metal complex which is formed. A chelate is produced when a metal ion coordinates with two or more donor groups of single ligand to form 5 or 6 membered hydrocyclic rings. So chelates are usually insoluble in water but soluble in organic solvents. So means as soon as you are adding ligand, the metal ion present will form complex via coordinated bond with these donor groups. So these groups are electron donor and they are forming complex with this metal ions. So they will form a complex. In this complex, some you can look like 5 member or 6 member heterocyclic rings. So this complex generally formed is insoluble in water, but these are soluble in organic solvents. You can say like acetone or ethyl acetate or DCM. So, but they are completely insoluble in aqueous medium. Then one is chelating agent. So a chelating agent, or you can say ligand, is a substance whose molecule can form several bonds to a single metal ion. So like this ethylene diamine. So there are two nitrogens. They have their charge, free electron pairs. Lone pairs are available. So these can form a multiple bonds, or you can say two bonds in this case, with a single metal ion via forming a salt. So that is known as chelating agent. So if there is single molecule of atom of single molecule, or you can say atom of this metal is present, this molecule ethylene diamine is going to form two bonds. Then multiple molecules of this can form different multiple bonds. So it will look like 5 membered or 6 membered rings, you can say. In this case, because there are four different groups are present in this molecule, one is metal, it will form 5 membered rings. So this will form a 5 membered rings like structure that will be chelate, and this ligand is known as chelating agent. Another reaction is diazotization titration. So in this case, what is going to happen? We know in organic chemistry reaction, if we are performing reaction of our primary aromatic amines with sodium nitrite, it will form diazotized diazotized compound. So this is the same reaction we are performing in titration. So in diazotization titration can be used to estimate primary aromatic amino group or compounds quantitatively using standard sodium nitrite solution. So it will same, I have already told you, as soon as we have primary aromatic solution, primary amino aromatic solution in our solution, which we have to determine how much amount of this amino group is present in solution, we will use a standard solution of sodium nitrite. We will add it slowly. It is going to react with this amine in presence of acidic media, and it will form a diazonium salt, N2Cl. Then we can determine this amount of this, you can say, via volume, how much volume of the sodium nitrate is used. We will come to know how much amount of this primary aromatic amine is present. How you are going to determine complete nitrate, you can say, diazotization of this primary aromatic amine? The end point depends upon detection of small excess of nitrous acid which is then present, because as soon as you are adding sodium nitrate, it is completely consumed by this ammonia. But as this will be completely converted to diazonium salt, then it will remain as it. So excess of this sodium, you can say, sorry, sodium nitrate or this nitrous acid will tell us about the end point of this titration. So this can be demonstrated visually by starch iodine paper we can use. Then we can put some drop of this solution on this starch iodine paper, so it will give a color change. So it will come, we will come to know that our reaction is complete or end point is achieved. Because we are using external indicator or your starch iodine paper, we are not adding it to the solution. This method is also known as external indicator method. Another type is precipitation titration. In precipitation titration means a reaction, kind of reaction in which ionic species, or you can say two ions, will react with each other and form an insoluble product. This insoluble product will settle at the base of our conical, or you can say our glassware, whichever we are using, either beaker or conical flask. It means it is an insoluble product in the solution. So this is known as precipitation titration. So you can read it. Precipitation is process in which there is combination of ionic species to form insoluble product. This product is called precipitate, or phenomena is called precipitation. The forming of this precipitate is known as precipitation. So precipitation titration involves of formation of this precipitate at equivalence point or end point, which indicate completion of reaction. So it is also known as Argento matrix titration. How this solution is forming? Again, I'm going to repeat. When we have some ionic solution, ions present in the solution, we are adding some standard solution with opposite ions, it is going to form insoluble product, that is precipitate, and this precipitate will settle down at the end point of this titration at the base of our glassware which we are going to use. So this is a principle behind precipitation titration. Then another one type is oxidation reduction titration. So also you can say redox titration, in which two agents, one is oxidizing agent, one is reducing agent, we are going to use. So if we have to perform titration of oxidizing agent, we will use standard reducing agent. If we have to perform titration of reducing agent, we will use a standard oxidizing agent. So it can be used to determine quantitatively oxidizing agent and reducing agent amount present in a solution. How we will achieve endpoint in this titration? The endpoint such titrations can be determined either by color changing indicator, like we have used in acid base titration, or you can simply determine potential of reaction, or you can say redox reaction, which is going to happen in this titration. So we can determine change in potential, or also you can determine using instrumental method. So there are multiple methods for determining endpoint in this oxidation reduction titration. As there is no universal oxidizing agent which can be titrated against every reducing agent and vice versa, because in every reducing agent you require different oxidizing agent, and similarly for every oxidizing agent require different reducing agent, because there is no universal oxidizing or reducing agent present which can be used in all cases. So hence the choice of oxidizing agent to be used against a particular reducing agent depends upon how the reaction conditions and standard reduction potential of oxidizing agent. So if you have to choose any oxidizing or reducing agent, then you will have to come to know which reducing agent or oxidizing agent you are going to determine, and which how it is going to form complex with its complementary agent. Then another term or another type you can say of titration is non-aqueous titration. So those are titration in which are high very weak acidic or basic, and they are so that's why they are carried out in non-aqueous solvent, because in aqueous media they can't produce, you can say, hydrogen ions or hydroxide ions easily. So for that purpose we are using non-aqueous solutions. So advantage is that many water insoluble substances which can't, or you can say form solution in the aqueous media can be titrated using this non-aqueous titration. So in this case water can't be used, so because it interferes with weakly acid and basic substances. So as we know, water itself can act as the acid and base, it can give its proton and hydroxide ions. So to avoid that thing or interference from the water, we are not going to use water in this titration. So that's why these reactions are known as non-aqueous titration. So based upon, you can say, Bronsted, Lowry and Lewis theory of acids and base, the nature and influence of leveling effect of non-aqueous solvents and substance. So this is mainly basic principle behind this titration. So we are talking about titrations, different kind of titrations we are going to use. So there are some common terms which you should understand. So if you are going to perform a titration in lab, what is that solution we are using in conical flask, what will be it called? And what if we are using one solution in burette, what will it will be called? What will be indicator? What will be end point or equivalence point? So first one is titrant. Titrant is you can say standard solution, a standard solution of precisely known concentration, which we are going to use for determination of unknown concentration of unknown sample. So this solution is generally taken in burette while performing titration. So you can say it is a standard primary standard solution used for determination of solution of precisely known concentration. Then second term is titrant or analyte. Analyte means a solution, a sample which we have to determine, or a titrant whose concentration we have to determine. So what we are going to estimate, that is known as analyte. It is also called as titrant. The solution whose concentration has to be determined, it will be taken in generally in conical flask. So main these two terms you should not get confused in these two terms. What is titrant and titrant? Titrant is standard solution whose concentration is precisely known, and titrant is that we are going to take in conical flask whose concentration we have to determine. So if you are confused in this, you can use titrant and analyte term. Analyte means which whose concentration we have to determine. Then equivalence point, the point where the acid is neutralized with base. In acid base titration we can take example, or any condition in which complete reaction is complete. You can say the point where acid is neutralized with base or the point at which neutralization is complete is called equivalence point. So here we are taking example of acid base titration. So where complete acid is neutralized with base, that will be equivalence point. That is our equivalence point of our titration. Then end point, how we will determine endpoint. So as soon as you are going to add one drop of this you can say titrant in our analyte, it will change some color, or it will show indicate some completion of reaction. So this point is known as endpoint. So it is just a point after equivalence point where we are going to just add one drop, or you can say 0.1 ml of solution of titrant, that will show that our reaction is, or our neutralization is complete. So this will be termed as endpoint. So this is in reading it will give a little bit error because reaction is completed at equivalence point, but as soon as we have added this 0.1 ml solution more of titrant, it will be added in the volume which we are going to determine. So this error is also known as titration error. This error is also called additive error. So we will discuss it in different types of error also. So different instrument apparatus, sorry, glassware which we are going to use in these titrations, like main thing is volumetric flask. So different kind of volumetric flask like 50, 100 ml, 250, 500 or 1000 ml, which we are going to prepare standard solutions. For standard solution we have to prepare a solution of known or precisely known concentration that will be prepared in this volumetric flask. Second one is burette, in which we are going to take our standard solution. So for this, normally we are using 50 ml or 100 ml burids, whatever we are performing titration, depending on type of and amount of these titrations, we can use different types of burid. Then droppers, like you have to add some indicator 2 or 3 drops, so we are using for that kind of dropper. Then pipettes, so for making some standard solutions, like you have to take HCl, H2SO4 from concentrated solution in a beaker or in volumetric flask, like, so you can add this precise amount using this graduated pipettes. Funnel, if you are adding some solvents like water you have to add, you can use this, so it will avoid the expelling of solvent or do your diluent around at the shelf or around the neck of our glasswares. Then measuring cylinder, you can like paper, you can use it for measuring if it is in a large amount, so you have to measure, you can measure it using measuring cylinder. Then wash bottles, for adding some solution or solvents, you can use it. Another method in chemical methods we were studying, so we have studied first volumetric methods, second one is gravimetric method in this case. So gravimetric means it is a technique through which amount of analyte can be determined through measurement of mass. Means like precipitation titration we have covered. In this, what we are going to do, we are going to perform some reaction via which our analyte is going to form a insoluble product like precipitates. Then we will weight that precipitate, we will dry it and determine its weight on a weighing balance. So that is a procedure for gravimetric method. So it depends upon comparing the masses of two compounds containing the analyte. So if we have some standard, we are going to compare it with our sample. The principle behind gravimetric analysis is that mass of an ion in a pure compound can be determined and then used to find the mass percentage of same ion in a known quantity of impure compound. Means again, I'm going to repeat, the principle behind gravimetric analysis is that the mass of an ion in a pure compound, mass of an ion in a pure compound can be determined and then used to find mass percent of the same ion in a known quantity of impure compound. In order to analyze to be accurate, certain condition must be met. The ion being analyzed must be completely precipitate. So again, repeating in this gravimetric method means if we have to determine amount of ion, we are adding its counter ion, it will form a precipitate. It will get completely precipitated. So first condition, that it will met the whole amount of that ion present in a solution or sample should get precipitated. Then we are going to get that precipitated and weigh it, and then we will compare it with our standards. So then we will, again with standard, we will determine how much amount of that ion or that sample is present in our given sample. Second condition for this reaction, the precipitate must be a pure compound. So if there are some like errors which can be because if some other ions can also get precipitated, it will add to the weight of that ion. So that is the error. So it must be a pure compound precipitate of a single ion. So that's we will have to choose a counter ion very precisely or very specifically. Then the precipitate must be easily filtered. The precipitate should be such that you can easily separate it from the solution. Now, because it should not stick to the filter paper, so it should be like that you can easily filter it off and then dry it and can weigh it. Where you are going to use gravimetric analysis. So for calibration of instruments, due to fact that this technique can easily give accurate and highly correct idea, it is actually used in calibrating other instruments in reference to standards. Then for elemental analysis of inorganic compounds, you have to determine inorganic or you can say metal ions present in any solution. Then you can use this gravimetric method. As soon as inorganic ions are going to react with some ligand, they will form a insoluble complex. You can filter it off and you can weigh it and compare it with the standard. So this method is highly accurate and precise when using modern analytical balance. So via this method, you can precisely determine amount of ion present in any sample. But in this case, you should first condition that is met, precipitate must be pure compound. Only then you can determine accurate and precise amount of that ion. If it is not pure, it will add up some impurities also, then that will be error in our observations. Then it is a relatively inexpensive apparatus is required as comparison to, you can say, instrumental method we are going to use. It is inexpensive technique. Then disadvantages. So disadvantage is that this procedure is a time consuming procedure, so we need a time, or you can say manpower for this procedure. It is a time consuming, so it is long. So it is a different types of this gravimetric analysis are, it is of three types: precipitation, volatilization, and then electrogravimetry. So these are going to, are going to discuss it in module 3 in detail. Third point of this chemical technique is gasometric analysis. So what is involved behind this gasometric principle, behind this gasometric analysis? So in this, if we are going to perform a reaction like with some counter ions or with counter chemical, there will be production of some gas, or you can say gas will be evolved or absorbed. So there are two things: either it will be released or absorbed in a chemical reaction. So then this amount of this gas will be determined. So based on that, we are going to calculate how much amount of our chemical or ions is present in that sample. So like some of the gases which are analyzed by gasometry are carbon dioxide. In major reactions, some carbon dioxide is produced or nitrogen is produced. Then this is nitric oxide, cyclopropane, amyl nitrate, ethylene, helium. So in major cases, this carbon dioxide is produced. You can determine amount of this carbon dioxide. You can measure it. Then according to that, you can come to know how much amount of that reactant from which this decarboxylation is done is present. Second type of our analytical techniques in quantitative analytical techniques is electrical method. In electrical methods, we are going to use some potential determining method on charge based or some other techniques like. So this involves analysis involve measurement of electric current, either voltage or resistance in relation to concentration of some species in the solution. So either we have some ions, we are going to use some potential reactions which can be performed, like electric current we can determine based on some electron, then its voltage we can determine. So these are different types of electrical methods: potentiometry, conductometry, polarography, voltammetry, amperometry. So what are these terms? Potentiometry in electrical methods, first term is potentiometry. So what in this method, we measure electrical potential of electrode in equilibrium with an ion to be determined. So if we are going to use some sample in which we have to determine some ions, we are going to use its use as a cathode, and then we will use some electric potential of an electrode. So potential of electrode will be determined. Based on that, we can determine how much amount of that ion is present in the solution. Conductometry. So in this, electrical conductivity, or you can say electrical charge, will be measured on the electrode with reference electrode. So if we have some reference electrode also, based on that we are going to calculate how much conductivity of our ions is there in the solution. Based on that we can calculate how much amount of ions is present in the solution. Then polarography means current that flows when a predetermined potential is applied to two electrodes immersed in a solution to be analyzed. So we have some potential, already fixed potential is applied according to method. So solution which we have to determine for our analytes, or you can say for ions, we are going to immerse two electrodes in that solution. Okay, then we are going to apply our potential, voltage potential. Then based on that, what amount of current flows between these two electrodes, on that we can based on that current flow we can determine amount of our analyte present in the solution. Fourth is amperometry, which involves the measurement of current at constant voltage applied at the dropping mercury electrode. Means again involves measurement of currents at constant voltage. So again we are applying a constant voltage and we are measuring currents at a dropping mercury electrode. So with different types of electrodes are used in these cases. In polarography we are using two electrodes. In conductometry we are using some reference electrode. Based on that we are comparing our another electrode with that. In amperometry we are using mercury, dropping mercury electrode. So these are different methods of electrical analytical methods used in the pharmaceutical analysis. Then comes instrumental method of analysis. Means we are using some instruments for determination of either concentration or structure of our compounds. So it involves measurement of some physical properties of compound or a substance. So physical properties, how much amount of these samples, how much amount of light or different waves they are going to absorb or transmit, or they are going to produce some fluorescence. Then how they are going to behave in chemical environment or different magnetic environment. So based on these properties, we are going to determine their concentration and their structure. These methods are employed for determination of minor or trace concentration of elements in the sample. So if we have some sample in which we have to determine very low amount of any ions or any chemicals, we can use these instrumental methods because these are some expensive techniques, you can say. So in this case, these are highly sensitive techniques in which we can determine up to pico level of these analytes. So instrumental methods are preferred due to their selectivity, because they can selectively determine particular ions based on their methods used. Then there are high speed, because they can quickly, or you can say fastly, determine any ions. Then accuracy, these methods are highly accurate in comparison to volumetric and then electrometric methods. Then they are simple to use because they are user based, some graphics we are using, so it is easy to use using some softwares. Then in this case you need very less manpower, and it is a fast method, you can say. So you can easily determine any concentration of ions in this using some instruments. What kind of instruments you are going to use? Some examples are there, like spectroscopic methods or spectroscopic instruments, you can say, which are going to use for measurement of amount of radiant energy of particular wavelength emitted by sample. So first example, we have UV visible spectroscopy. In this case, we are going to use some UV wavelength rays that will be passed through a sample. Then we can determine how much amount they are absorbing of that light, and then based on that we can determine concentration of our sample present in the solution. Then some infrared, so we are passing IR waves or IR wavelength through that sample, either it is in liquid form or solid form. Then they are absorbing some light and then transmitting. So that will be then absorbance of that IR waves will cause excitation in the you can say electrons. Then that will be come to again relaxed position, it will transmit that rays. That amount of transmittance is determined, and based on that we can determine what kind of compound or what kind of groups or functional groups or ions are present in our sample. Then atomic absorption spectroscopy. Atomic absorption spectroscopy is a technique in which we can determine amount of some atoms based on their or you can say concentration of some atoms present in a sample. Nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy, in which we are going to use some magnetic environment, and we will apply some magnetic environment, how our compound is or our sample is going to behave under that magnetic conditions. So based on that we are going to calculate how much amount of protons or carbons are present. Then what is the concentration of compound? Now there is quantitative techniques also. Based on that we can also determine quantitatively what amount of sample is present. Then some other examples of instrumental methods. Emission methods, first one was the wavelength or determine, we are using determining for based on wavelength. Then is emission based, because they were first absorbing. Now there is emission methods, which involves heating or electrical treatment of the sample so that the atoms are rise to the excited states to emit energy, and the intensity of this energy is measured. Means again we are applying in this case heating or electrical current, which will excite the molecules. Then it will emit energy to come into the relaxed state again. Then amount of that energy that is released is measured, and we will come to know based on that how many ions or how much amount of concentration of that sample is present. So their examples are like emission spectroscopy, flame photometry, in which flame in we are using heating, then fluorimetry spectroscopy. These are instrumental methods which we are going to use in analytical techniques under instrumental methods. Okay. Then other methods, chromatographic methods. So separation, you can say based on chromatography, you are performing separation of some solution or mixture. Then we are going to determine based on their ionic concentration. So chromatographic techniques and electrophoretic methods are separation methods for a mixture of compounds, but also applied for identification of compounds. First one is like GC. So if you have some mixture, you are performing its gas chromatography. It will give some, you can say at high temperature, it will convert to, your analyte will convert to gas phase. Then under it will pass through column, and you will get, you will perform get separation of your sample. Then you can get peaks, different peaks under chromatogram. Then you will come to know what kind of spectra is present. Based on that, you can calculate its perform its, you can say, comparison with standard and determine amount of and type of sample analytes present in a sample. High performance liquid chromatography. So basic on using, you can say, simple some standard procedure, you can determine which kind of analyte present by comparing it with standard graphs, and then what amount of that chemical or that ion is present based on its comparison with area under the peak under standards. So we have some standard graphs, then we can compare our area under the peak in our graph along with that standard, and then we can calculate amount of that chemical present in our sample. Then again, thin layer chromatography, you can calculate RF values. Then based on its another technique is HPTLC, it's advanced version. In this you can again, like HPLC, you can generate chromatogram, and then based on that concentration peaks in the under chromatogram, you can calculate amount of chemicals, or you can say concentration of that chemical or ions present in your sample. Right, so these are some diagrams of our, or you can say photos of our instruments which we are going to use. So it is, first one is UV. So this we are going to use UV wavelength. So it will give some graph like this. Here it is shown. So in this we will come to know how much amount of sample is present based on this concentration. The peak will be directly this area under the curve will be directly proportional to the concentration of our compound. As we will increase concentration, this area under the peak will increase, and it will, we will come to know, we can compare with some you can say standard curve. Then based on that we will come to know about the concentration. Similarly, second one is IR. So its graph will look like this one. So it is based on transmittance of IR by our sample. Okay. Then next one is HPLC. So this is HPLC, how it look like. So there we are going to use some wild phase. We are going to inject our samples from the injector from this place. There are, we are keeping our sample in automated. It will inject sample automatically. It will pass through column. Then through detector, it is going to give a response. Like you can say UV, it is also going to give a chromatogram based on time. So particularly at based on retention time and its area under the curve, we can determine concentration and type of analyte present. Then one is NMR. So these are some, we are going to apply magnetic field, as I've already told you. This is how this instrument looks like. So under this magnetic environment, how protons and carbons present in our sample are going to behave. We can calculate how many carbons, how many hydrogens are present. Based on that, we can also calculate amount of now sample concentration of sample in a solution also. What are some advantages of instrumental method? So I've already told you it is a highly precise, you can say accurate method. Then highly specific methods. We can use very small amounts. We need only small amount for determination of error analyte. So if we have very small or very less quantity of our sample, we can easily determine its structure also. We can easily determine its concentration also using these instruments. Then because why? Because these methods are highly sensitive. These instruments are highly sensitive, and they can detect even a very low amount of ions present in a solution. Then measurements which are obtained from these you can say instruments, these are reliable and repeatable. So if you are using same sample again and again, this is repeatable, and it is, the results are also reliable. So you can trust on these results. Then method is very fast as comparison to other methods. This is a fast method. Either some, in some cases we are using some automated instruments, so this is a automated process also. Then even complex systems can be handled easily. So user friendly graphics we are going to use in this case. So complex instruments like GC, or you can say atomic absorption spectroscope, which we are going to perform, that can be easily handled from a system by just setting. So that is easy in this case. Disadvantages: for each instrument that we are going to use, initial calibration is required. So for that purpose, you can say we some need some internal standards. So we are going to perform some standard test for each instrument. Then we will come to know it is giving expected result or not. If it is giving expected result, we can say our instrument or our instrument that we are going to use is calibrated or not. So it is giving expected result, it is calibrated, we can use it. If it is not, then we will need to perform its calibration before using. So for each procedure, or you can say for particular time, we need to perform calibration of our instruments. Then final accuracy of our results that we are obtaining, it is we are going to get in plus minus 5% of actual value, or you can say uh, accurate value. So it is within plus minus 5%. Then initial cost and upkeep of complex equipment is high. Initial cost means GC you are going to use, NMR that you are going to use. So for purchase of that chemical, purchase of that instrument, its cost is very high. Similarly, for upkeep means we have to maintain these instruments. Their maintenance is also costly. So rather than volumetric method and electrochemical method, their initial cost and upkeep is costly. But after, if you are using it regularly, their per sample cost will be less in this case as comparison to other methods. Then concentration range is also limited because it is a highly sensitive method and we can determine its very low concentration. For in case of high concentration, this method range is very limited in these instruments. Then sizable space is required because instruments are large, like NMR. For particular, we need particular room for that instrument. Like UV, we need particular cell for particular area for each instrument. Then specialized training is also needed for handling of these instruments. The analyst will be particularly specialized trained in these instruments. No, we can't use it simply. Anybody can go and use it. So for using these instruments, we need specialized person or trained person. Then fourth method of this quantitative analytical techniques is biological and microbiological methods. So these biological methods are used when potency of drug or its derivative can be not properly determined by physical or chemical method. They are called bioassays. For example, we are using drug and then we have to determine its potency, which we can't determine using chemical or physical method. So in that case, we are going to use bioassays. So these are bioassays. You can also say these biological methods also known as bioassays. We are performing some reactions again, then we are again using some instruments to determine their concentration. So microbiological methods are usually used to observe potency of antibiotic and antimicrobial agents. So these methods include cup plate method, turbidimetric analysis. So in this case, if we are using some solution, it will give turbidity. Like in a solution, based on that, how much amount of turbidity is present, we are going to calculate how much concentration of particular analyte or ion is present. So what is the importance of this pharmaceutical analysis now? Why we are going to use it? Some identification of raw materials, whatever we are going purchasing from any other vendors, which we are going to use for production or for a research purpose in our labs, we need to perform its analysis because our quality of our product is based on this raw material. If raw material is not of low quality, our product will be of low quality. So we have to perform analysis of raw material to determine its quality, that it is of high quality, and it will ensure that our product will be of also will be of high quality. Then determination of additional impurities. So if there are chances of introduction of impurities either in process or either from raw material, so we have to determine that impurities in our final product. So for that purpose, we have to perform analysis that comes under, you can say, quality control and quality assurance section of industries. So we will come to know if there is amount of impurities under that is recommended range or recommended limit, that means our product is of high quality. If it is high amount of these impurities is high, our product is of low quality. Then stability of drug. So under particular storage conditions, how this drug, our molecule or product is going to behave. So time to time we have to perform its analysis for its quality purpose, if our molecule is stable or not. If it is stable, it is not forming any side product on storage, it means these products are stable, and we can determine also its storage conditions from using this pharmaceutical analysis also. So for example, some drugs can be stored at room temperature, some can be stored at you can say low temperature in refrigerator. So this will be based on analysis techniques. Now, pharmaceutical analysis will tell us which kind of product is stable at what kind of, in which kind of conditions. Then we have to determine strength and concentration of chemical compounds. So if for example, I first example that I have given, like 500 mg paracetamol. So if we have made tablets, then we have to determine it is there 500 mg of paracetamol is present in tablet or not now. So for that purpose again we have to determine, we have to perform pharmaceutical analysis or analytical procedures. Then its strength, or this concentration or strength of this tablet form, or any other formulation also we can use this pharmaceutical analytical techniques. Then determine molecular weight of chemical compounds. If we have some unknown sample, we can determine using some mass spectroscopy technique, we can determine its molecular weight. So based on that we can identify our structure of our compounds. Similarly, structural elucidation using UV, IR, then NMR and mass. So these are techniques in which we are going to identify different kind of atoms present from, as I have given example, from mass we can determine its molecular weight. Then from that we are going to calculate some, you can say, how much amount of carbon hydrogen is present. Then again using NMR we can identify what kind of carbon and hydrogens are present simply. Based on that we can also calculate amount of number of carbon and hydrogens. Using IR we can determine what kind of functional groups like hydroxy, amino group or anything else present. So ultimately we can, by using or combining these techniques, analytical techniques, we can identify our structure of our synthetic compounds. So this was about some basic terms and importance of pharmaceutical analysis. So this was based on drugs, but in normal life also I have already told you we are performing analysis every day about daily use. We are using products some in daily life like milk, water, and based on their taste or some weird observations, physical observations. Now about talking about titrations we were using. So there are some standards used in titrations. So these are of two types like primary and secondary. But first, what are standards? So in pharmaceutical analysis, the word standard means a material containing a substance of our interest with known concentration, or you can say precisely known concentration. A sample, or sorry, a solution, you can say, which is having a particular substance or particular chemical or particular ion of precisely known concentration. That solution is perfectly, we know its concentration, how much amount is present. That is known as standard. So what are its functions? To provide a reference using which we can determine unknown concentration of solution. Means it will act as a reference compound, reference solution or compound. So we will compare the concentration of our unknown solution with this material, with this standard. Then the standardization of volumetric method. So if we are having, you can say, performing titration, then we are going to use some one primary standard in a burette, or you can say titrant. Then titrant, yes. Then we are going to perform its standardization. Then prepare of secondary standard means now we are going to if we have prepared some solution, then we are performing its standardization with primary standard, and then we will come to know its concentration, exact concentration also. So these are two types I have already told you, primary and secondary standard solutions standards. First one is primary standard. A primary standard solution is a compound of sufficient purity from which a standard solution is prepared by directly weighing of quantity followed by dilution to give defined volume. Means we already know that if we are going to prepare this solution with precisely weighing quantity and solubilizing it in a solvent, it will give solution of known concentration, that is primary standard. Then we can easily make different dilutions from this standard. These dilutions will also be of highly precisely known concentration, so that's why it will be termed as primary standard. So its solution is of high purity and less reactivity. Then primary standard solution, you can say it will be of high purity because it is not containing any impurity. It is highly pure chemical and less reactive. It is not going to react with, you can say, solvents or anything so that it can produce some side products. It is less reactive, or you can say stable. Then primary standard is a reagent that's stable. It is not a hydrate, has no water of hydration, and has high molecular weight. Means a solution which we are going to prepare by weighing, it is a chemical that is a pure form. It is not any salt form or hydrate form. It can be salt but not a hydrate form, that is it is not containing a water molecule or moisture. So that is its molecular weight is exactly of this molecule only, not of any hydrate or water molecule present. Then primary standards are typically used in titration to determine an unknown concentration and in other analytical techniques. So already, as I have already told you, these are mainly used in titrations. We have solution which we have to determine, analyte we have, then we are going to titrate it against these primary standards, because these are of known concentration. How much amount of this primary standard is going to react with that analyte, based on that we are going to calculate our analyte. So a primary standard solution should possess the following requirements. Similarly, that we have discussed in last slide, like high level of purity, means any chemical that we are going to use, it should be of high purity, 99.9% maximum purity that we should attain at least. Then low reactivity, or you can say high stability. It should not react under environmental condition, or it should not be hygroscopic so that it can absorb water easily from the environment. So it should be low reactivity, or it should be highly stable. Then high equivalent weight, so its weight that we are going to take while forming solution based on its molecular weight, so that amount we can weigh easily. So for that purpose this molecular weight should be high, so that it can reduce the chance of error while weighing this chemical. So again, second point, not hygroscopic. As I have already told, it should not be hygroscopic. Means if while weighing we are weighing it on balance, chemical balance or digital balance, it should not absorb a moisture from the air. So if it is going to absorb moisture, it is going to give some error in the weight. So that's why it should be not hygroscopic. Then non-toxic, so we can handle it easily. It should be inexpensive, so that we can, yeah, it is easily available, we can easily make our primary standard solutions. And readily available means it should be available in the market easily. When wherever you are working, it is not like it is available in local market, but it should be readily available. If you need, you can easily order it and get it timely for your research purpose or analytical purpose. Then it should have high relative molecular weight, as I've already told you, to avoid weighing errors. Then the substance should be readily soluble under the condition in which it is employed. Means now you have weighed this chemical, okay, you are making its solution, so you can easily you have to you can say solubilize it in any solvent. So under given condition or any under method, it should be easily solubilized in that solvent. The substance which are commonly used, you can say, as a primary standards that are mentioned below, mainly in acid base titration. Basic primary standard that we can use: sodium bicarbonate, sorry, sodium carbonate, then sodium tetraborate Na2B4O7, potassium hydrogen thalate, or potassium hydrogen iodide. These are some basic solution, basic chemicals which can be used. Basic means alkaline chemicals. Then acidic standards which can be used, like oxalic acid, benzoic acid, sulfamic acid, phenylcinchonic acid. Then in complex formation reactions like complexometric titration, we can use pure metal ions like zinc, copper, magnesium, manganese, and you can also use this salt like zinc chloride, calcium chloride, which can form particular coordinated bonds with ligands. Then for precipitation titrations or precipitation reactions, you can use some metal salts like silver nitrate or sodium chloride, then potassium chloride and potassium bromide. And for oxidation reduction reaction or titration, you can use oxidizing and reducing agents. For example, oxidants potassium dichromate, potassium bromate, potassium iodate, and reducing agents like sodium oxalate, oxalic acid, uh, arsenic trioxide, and pure metallic ions. Now comes secondary standard. The primary standards are for particular precisely known concentration solutions. Secondary standards. So in this case, we are going to prepare this solution, then we are going to standardize this solution. So secondary standard is a chemical that has been standardized against a primary standard for use in specific analysis. As I already told you, we have some solution that we have prepared using particular method, then we are going to standardize it against primary standard to know its exact concentration. Because we have for example, we are preparing one normal HCl solution, right? But while making this solution, there might be some personal error, or you can say some handling error might be there, due to which its concentration can vary. So for that purpose, we need to perform its standardization against primary standard. So against primary standard, we are going to perform its standardization. Then we will come to know exact or precise concentration of our this standard solution. So this will be known as secondary standard, which after knowing this concentration, it can be particularly used in further analytical methods now, because now you know its precise concentration. So these are secondary standards are commonly used to calibrate analytical methods. So a secondary standard is a standard that is prepared in laboratory, you can say, for a specific analysis. So we are preparing it in a particular lab. So it is usually standardized against primary standard. I have already explained it. It is a solution in which concentration of dissolved solute has not been determined from the weight of compound dissolved, but by reaction of volume of solution against a measured volume of primary standard solution. What does it say? For example, we are weighing any solution. We are, for example, we are preparing sodium hydroxide 0.1 normal sodium hydroxide solution in our lab. So we have calculated amount, then we weighed it, and then we have dissolved it in particular amount of solvent, and we can say it is 0.1 normal. But is it exactly now 0.1 normal sodium hydroxide solution? Because we are preparing it in lab, there may be some handling error. So then we can't say its concentration based on that weight that we have weighed for making this solution. We are going to titrate it against primary standard, then based on that volume that is of primary standard that is used, we are going to calculate its concentration. So that is the procedure for determining the concentration of secondary standard. So some examples like alkali hydroxide, inorganic acids, deliquescent substances. So it is, you can say, secondary standard is a kind of chemical which is of less purity than primary standard. As comparison to primary standard, it is of less purity, because if we are weighing, there might be some impurity. That's why we need to know exact amount only after titration. Then some chemicals might be less stable, while this secondary standard, it can be less stable. While we are performing or we are preparing this solution, it can form some side product or it can degrade. That's why we have to know its concentration after making its solution. Then it can be more reactive than primary standard, but its solution remains stable for a long time. Then titrated against primary standard. So for preparing it, it particularly should be titrated against primary standard to know its exact concentration. Then anhydrous sodium hydroxide is a secondary standard. It is highly hygroscopic. So if, for example, I have already given you this example of sodium hydroxide, we are preparing, for example, 0.1 normal. So based on calculations, we are weighing some amount in the lab. So as soon as you are weighing it, it will absorb moisture from the air. So it is highly hygroscopic. So that will give some error in the weighing. Then you are making its solution. So ultimately your concentration will vary from your calculated concentration. Then you have to again titrate it against HCl or H2SO4 solution, primary standard solution, you can say. Based on that, you are going to calculate this concentration of sodium hydroxide in the solution now. Because there is error due to weighing, this will be avoided by this titration now. Another example is potassium permanganate, that is often used as a secondary standard. It is less stable and it is reactive. Because this potassium permanganate is less stable under light, or you can say under storage condition, and is reactive, it can degrade. So easily, if you are weighing it, means there is some, might be some impurity which can affect the concentration of our final solution. So therefore, when a potassium permanganate solution is being prepared, it has to be standardized with the, again, primary standard to know the exact concentration of, or you can say to know the precise concentration of our solution. Based on these definitions, or you can say based on these last slides, you can differentiate now primary and secondary standard solutions. So first, primary standard solutions are solution made out of primary standard substance, means of high purity substance, of less reactive substance, or non-hygroscopic substance. You are using some highly pure substance to make this primary standard solution. Secondary substance standard solutions, they are solutions made specifically for certain analysis and which will be, you can say, standardized against primary standard. If you are preparing secondary standard solution, you first have to standardize it against primary standard. Only after that you can use this for particular analysis or any analytical method development or analytical method, you can say calibration. Then primary standard solutions are extremely pure. So if you are using primary standard chemical in solid form and making its solution, it is highly pure, 99.9%. It is not containing any impurity beyond 0.1%. But secondary solutions, they might be reactive, due to which they can be less pure. So their purity will be less than 99.9. It should be 99, it should maybe 98, based on its condition or its reactivity. Or it can be in hydrate form, so it can give error in weighing also. So based on that, these are less pure than the primary standard. Then primary standards are less or not reactive, or you can say highly unreactive. In case of when you are making solution, or when you are weighing it under normal storage condition, they are unreactive, they are not going to get degraded or decomposed in normal condition. But secondary substance, they can be reactive, they can react with environmental conditions and get degraded. That will, you ultimately decompose your product, and it will affect the concentration of your solution. Then primary standards are not hygroscopic, they are not going to absorb moisture from the air. But secondary standards are somewhat hygroscopic, so that's why they are so, you can absorb moisture and they can give error in weighing and ultimately can affect the final concentration of our solution. Last one, the primary standard solutions are used to standardize secondary standards and other reagents. So these primary standards can be used for standardization purpose of secondary standards. So they are of, you can say, reference material. But secondary standards, if you are preparing solution, you need to standardize it against primary standard. Only then you can use it for further analytical experiments. Right? I hope you understand what are primary and secondary standards and what is the difference between this now. Next topic of our this presentation is pharmacopoeia. We are going to mainly discuss about Indian pharmacopoeia. First of all, what is this pharmacopoeia mean? Pharmacopoeia is a word that is derived from pharmakon, Greek word, you can say pharmakon, which means drug, and poeia, to means how to make. So ultimately, the procedure to make drug which are enlisted in this pharma book, that is known as pharmacopoeia. So pharmakon, again, this is a pharmacopoeia is derived from two words, Greek words, you can say pharmakon, which means drug, and poeia means to make. how to make these drugs. This information about their standards is completely listed in this book that is known as Pharmacopoeia. So ultimately, you can say this is a kind of Gita or Quran of our pharmacy now. So it is a legally binding collection which we have to follow, which you have to follow by every pharmaceutical company also. So it is generally prepared by national and regional authority and contains list of medical substances, crude drugs, and formulas for making preparation from them. Every drug which is approved for use in any country or any region, you can say how to make that, about their purity and procedures, about the materials which you are going to use, either excipients or other raw materials which we are going to use. So it is a legal document which tells about their uh, purity and procedure. So we, every company or any institute which are going to use the make this medical substance, they have to follow its guidelines and its procedure. Only then you can get approval for its marketing. So what does it, this pharmacopoeia contains? This pharmacopoeia or this pharmacy book, you can say, contain a list of drugs, then its other related substances, what kind of drugs which are approved, different drugs, their information, and other substances which are related to these drugs, which are used in manufacturing, maybe some excipients or some, maybe some raw material which can be used for synthesis of API. Then what are their sources, what which should be their purity, what is their description, test which we have to perform for its quality control purpose, formulas for preparation, then actions which we are going to use, uses, doses, and storage conditions. Whatever these are the things which are included, I will tell you what is the description and all. But first of all, what is the different types of pharmacopoeia? There are number of pharmacopoeias in the world. Mainly, there are Indian pharmacopoeia, British, and United States, which we are going to discuss in this presentation. But there are some other also, like Argentina, Chinese, Mexican, Netherlands, Nordic, Polish, Russian, Spanish pharmacopoeias are there. First of all, what is about some about Indian pharmacopoeia? So Indian Pharmacopoeia Commission is an autonomous institution of Ministry of Health and Family Welfare which sets standard for all drugs that are manufactured, sold and consumed in India. So Indian Pharmacopoeia is generally published by Indian Pharmacopoeia Commission, which you can say sets guidelines, particular guidelines for all the drugs which are approved for selling and purchase for distribution in the market. So all guidelines about their manufacturing, about them selling them, about their consumption, about their quality, that are set by this Indian Pharmacopoeia Commission, that are part of our Indian Pharmacopoeia. So you can say it is official book of standards and medicines produced in India must comply with specified standards. So this book gives some guidelines, instructions to every industry or every manufacturer to so that their product can meet this requirements or specifically specified standards. Pharmacopoeia standards and acceptance criteria are set with the intention that they are used only as compliance requirement and not as requirement to guarantee total quality assurance. So these guidelines, or you can say standards and acceptance criteria, that is acceptance criteria for what kind, up to what limit that impurity or what amount of other ions can be present, that acceptance criteria. So these are generally set based on that any drug or molecule which can come to market is safe for our use or consumption, and so that it can easily compliance can get compliance with our requirements, and it is not going to give any toxic or side effect or adverse effect on our body. So vision of our Indian Pharmacopoeia Commission, the IPC is committed to promote the promotion of highest standard for drugs for use in prevention and treatment of diseases in human beings and animals, keeping in view the special features of pharmaceutical industry in India. So we already know India is known as pharmacy of the world, means it is a largest market for our this pharmacy pharmaceuticals in the world. So this, to maintain this thing and to get the you can say respect around the world and to maintain high quality of our pharmaceuticals in the world, this commission, Indian Pharmacopoeia Commission, set some guidelines and standards. So based on that, we can produce high quality drugs for prevention and treatment of diseases either in humans or animals. So that you can we can also compete at the world level with you can say international or MNC pharmaceutical companies. So now some basis on some Indian pharmacopoeia. First, it was you can say uh, first edition was introduced in 1955 of our IP under the chairmanship of Dr. B.N. Rao, B.N. Ghosh, sorry. So, but before that, before pre-independence, you can say British pharmacopoeia was also used for in India for drug this to set up standards for our pharmaceutical industries. First official pharmacopoeia of India that was appeared in 1868 that was edited by Edward John Waring that was again part of British pharmacopoeia. Then colonial or you can say British pharmacopoeia addendum means another additions or removals which happened in this pharmacopoeia that were introduced in 1898 in Britain, and then that was introduced in India in 1900. So to then after this in 1946, Government of India issued a one list known as Indian Pharmacopoeia List about chemicals. So there they issued a one list known as Indian Pharmacopoeia List. The process of publishing first pharmacopoeia started in year 1944. So it was you can say this under in 1948 we have published we got this pharmacopoeia commission, and the government of India appointed Indian Pharmacopoeia Committee in 1948 to prepare officially pharmacopoeia of India, so its own pharmacopoeia you can say. For that purpose in 1948 a commission was set up that is known as Indian Pharmacopoeia Committee. So after work of few years, first edition of this IP got published in 1955 as a official gadget, you can say under the chairmanship of Dr. B.N. Ghosh. In this edition, you can say it contains around 986 monographs. Then after its you can say supplement for further its that additional document that was published in 1960. After 1955 its supplement was published in 1960. Then second edition of this IP was published in 1966 under the chairmanship of Dr. B. Mukherjee. So this system was this you can say IP was again in English, and in this case doses forms or doses concentrations were expressed in metric system. For tablets and injections, user strength have been given. So strength of tablets, how much concentration is going to be there of API, and similarly for injections, how much concentration of particular API is going to be there was mentioned in this IP. So it was after this you can say after monograph of drugs, particularly this their manufacturing, how you are going to formulation these doses form was given. In this 274 monographs from IP 55 and their supplements were deleted. So first edition was in 1955. From that, total 274 monographs were deleted in second edition, but 93 new monographs were added also there. Then its supplement was published in 1975. Another supplement for its addition or an additional documents that was published in 1975. This supplement contains 126 new monographs included, and earlier published 250 monographs were amended or modified. For their purity or their procedures, they were modified. Similarly, in this case, chlora vaccine that was included in our second edition was also removed from the in this supplement. After that, third edition that was you can say published in 1985 under the chairmanship of Dr. Nityanand. So in this, it was published in two volumes and nine appendices. It contains two volume or you can say nine appendices. So in this case, what happens from second? What was the difference? 261 new monographs were added, while 450 monographs were deleted from the earlier version. Then addendum to this third edition was published in 1989, in which 46 new monographs were added. 46 new monographs were added and 126 were modified. Then second amendment was to this third edition was published in 1991. So where 62 new monographs were again added and 110 were modified. Then after that fourth edition was published in 1996 under the chairmanship of again Dr. Nityanand. So it was made effective, you can say, from 1st December 1996. This edition contains around 1149 monographs and 123 appendices. Again, it contains 1149 monographs and 123 appendices. It include 294 294 new monographs, but 110 monographs from earlier edition were also deleted from this. So for this fourth edition, first addendum 1 has been effective from 31st December 2000, where 42 monographs were added. Then second addendum was added in, you can say, 2003, where 19 new monographs were added. Then again, in this case, it was only containing the drugs which were used in human beings, but there was one supplement was also published, which contains 208 monographs and 4 appendices. Then comes fifth edition, which was published in, you can say, 2007 under the chairmanship of again Dr. Nityanand. So in this, it was published in 3 volumes. It was containing 3 volumes. Volume 1, which was containing journal notice, which thing we have added, which we think we have deleted. So this was containing some few notices and journal chapters, what we are going to cover in this, you can say, uh, pharmacopoeia. Then volume 2 and 3, they contain journal monographs on drug substances, their doses, formulations, and pharmaceutical aids, or you can say excipients, which we are going to use. So these two, volume 2 and 3, they were containing these monographs based on these drugs. What does these monographs contain generally? You can say, uh, these there are 3 parts of pharmacopoeia in fifth. That was we are going to I'm going to tell. Introduction to including journal notice, that I have told. In first volume, it was included what are different things included, what are different drugs, new drugs included in this, then which one are deleted. Then volume 2 and 3 contains monographs of official drugs which are introduced and how their formulation. I will tell you about the structure of monograph also. Then appendix and indexes. So first one, introduction, is it summarizes different changes including additions, deletions in current edition compared to last edition. So the difference between last edition and this new edition, that is covered in this introduction, or you can say volume 1. To avoid any misinterpretation and misunderstanding of later part of text, attention should be paid to this journal notice. So if you are studying about pharmacopoeia, you should first read about this, any addition or deletions, so it can avoid, if you are having any misunderstanding or you can say interpretation, you can avoid reading this introduction section. Second thing is monograph. It is a detailed written study of single specialized subject, or you can say any drug. An aspect of it is known as monograph. So any detailed study of particular single specialized subject means single particular product or dosage form. It is given in detail. It is known as monograph. So it is a book, pamphlet, or document that is complete in itself. Means it is giving whole information from starting to end. So it is complete within itself. It provides a reliable basis for, you can say, judging the quality of drug substances, way to control adulterated and contaminated medicine, set standards for quality, purity, and strength, concise description of single substances, reference for pharmaceutical drug specifications. What is the format of these monographs? The pharmacopoeial monograph give following information. First, name of drug, then its synonyms, different names by which it can be known at any other region, or you can say in market. Then it's what is its chemical formula and molecular weight. Then category, to under it belongs to which category, it is medicinal product or it is pharmaceutical aid. Then doses, what kind of at which doses this is available, represent average range of quantity suitable for adults. Then description, physical properties of that drug or that for compound. Then its solubility, aqueous or organic solvent standards, it will describe or prescribe the standards of purity and strength. Then identification, how you are going to identify this API is, or drug or any pharmaceutical aid is present or not, include some specific and some non-specific test for identity of substances. Then different tests for purity, how you are going to determine uh, if this is pure or not. So how much amount of this concentration or present. So this can be done by using limit test, loss on drying, melting point. Then method of assay, means after formulation how you are going to perform its assay. The term assay is used in pharmacopoeia for quantitative determination of principal ingredients of official substance and their preparation. Then what are their storage condition after making formulation or any doses form, then how you are going to store and where you are going to store it. These are all things mentioned under the monograph. Third part of pharmacopoeia is appendices and index. So it can, you can say, comprehensive section of appendices are presented followed by journal notice and monographs. The apparatus that are needed for various pharmacopoeial tests and assays are described in appendix. Other than appendices, that appendices include. So this is contained generally as some additional information, you can say, which we need for performing particular specific test or particular analytical procedure. Like for example, infrared spectra of drugs, if we are their monographs are given, so for particular determining their purity or structure, infrared spectra are included in pharmacopoeia also. Then with different apparatus appendix for their apparatus which are going to be used in test or assays are included. Then one appendix for biological test and determinations is included, one appendix for chemical test, one for chromatographic method and electrophoresis, then one for spectrophotometry, one for clarity and color of solution, then one for disintegration and a dissolution test, how you are going to perform this test based on that and what is the procedure. Then physical test which we can perform, one index is for that, one index for microbiological assays, one for limit test for particulate matter, like for chloride, for sulfates, different limit tests are there, so for one index is for given for that. Then other tests for determination, journal information, reagent and solution, reference substance and tables. So these indexes are included in the pharmacopoeia. So we were discussing about fifth edition. After that, sixth edition was published in 2010. So this sixth edition of Indian Pharmacopoeia is published by Indian Pharmacopoeia Commission, Ghaziabad, in accordance with plan, you can say, and completed through untiring efforts of its member. So it's supersedes the 2007 edition, but any monograph of earlier edition that does not figure in this edition. This edition was effective from 1st September 2010. And then it contains also again three volume. Volume 1, which was containing notice, preface, and structure of you can say Indian Pharmacopoeia Commission, acknowledgements, introduction, and journal chapters. Volume 2, it was containing journal notice, journal monographs of doses form, monograph on drug substances, doses form, and pharmaceutical aids. Then volume 3 was containing monographs on drug substances, doses form, and pharmaceutical aids again. So this volume 1 mainly about IPC and its structure and some journal notice, and volume 3 again about drug substances and doses forms and pharmaceutical aids. Followed by monographs on vaccines and immunosera. So after these drugs, there were another monographs for vaccines which were going to be used, and then immunosera that were used for human use. Then herbs and herbal products were also another edition monograph were there. Then some biotechnology products were also included in this IP in sixth edition. And then seventh edition was published in 2014. So with its addendum in 2015 and 2016, two addendums were there. So in seventh edition, so presented in, it was in 4 volumes. The scope of pharmacopoeia has been extended to include additional anti-cancer drugs and antiretroviral drugs. So in this, additional anti-cancer drugs and antiretroviral drugs were included. So it included almost 2,550 monographs of drugs, out of which 577 drugs were new. New monographs were added. Of these 577 new monographs included 313 monographs on drug substances, dosage form, and pharmaceutical aids, 43 new drug substances monograph, 10 were on antibiotics, and 31 herbal monographs and 5 vaccines. Okay, then 8th edition was published in 2018. So this was again its one addendum was published in 2019. Then uh, okay, we are going to discuss this in next one. So first, let's revise little bit about what we have covered in this lecture. Uh, for example, what some questions can be there, like what define pharmaceutical analysis. Now you can easily tell someone what is pharmaceutical analysis. So performing any analytical method to determine quality, purity, and safety of any substance. So different analytical procedure which we are employing, so that is known as pharmaceutical analysis. What is its scope? I've already told you, every industry, every company, every manufacturing unit, we need analyst. Because if we have to get approval from regulatory authorities also, we need to show that our products compliance with set standards that can be only approved by you can say analyst. Then different techniques of analysis, I've already told you, qualitative and quantitative. In qualitative, you can say just it is present or no. It is going to give answer in yes or no. Then quantitative, you are going to quantify the amount of that substance present in the sample. So it was of various types, like volumetric method, gravimetric method, gasometric methods. So volumetric, we were measuring some volume based via titration, in which we have covered acid based titration, then we have covered non-aqueous titration, we have covered diazotization titration, we have covered oxidation reduction titration, we have covered precipitation titration, and complexometric titration. So we have covered about all these topics with their principles. Then we have covered gravimetric method, in which we were weighing our material after its ionization and its was forming insoluble product. So based on that, we were calculating how much amount of iron is present. Then gasometric method, in which gas is evolved or absorbed. Based on that, we were calculating how much amount of substance is present, right? Then there was instrumental methods. Instrumental method, we were using different instruments like UV instrument, then IR. In different, we are using different wavelengths in this UV, IR, NMR. Okay, then chromatographics like HPLC, GC. So these are based on different principles and different, you can say there is high, these methods are highly selective, sensitive, and gives highly accurate readings. So but little bit you can say expensive, their initial cost and their upkeeping is, you can say, little bit expensive. But per sample, if you are running it continuously and you are running it from long term, then ultimately you can say its per sample cost come to is less than their another methods. Okay, then what do you understand by volumetric analysis? I've already told you, volumetric analysis or titrimetric analysis means we are going to perform titration, in which we are going to estimate concentration of our samples based on volume of primary standard that is used for their neutralization purpose or for their precipitation purpose. Then define qualitative and quantitative analysis. I've already told you, long questions which can be asked from this chapter, you can say explain different techniques of analysis with suitable example. So different techniques, qualitative and quantitative, then you can you can classify them, this quantitative analysis that we have covered. Then give a comparative characteristic features of various analytical techniques. So you can cover instruments in this case, then you can cover uh, different techniques, volumetric, gasometric, gravimetric, and instruments, all instruments. Then quantitative analysis in quality of drug. How this quantitative analysis is helpful in quality of drug. So justify this statement with logical explanations now. So I already told you, give an example of paracetamol tablet that we were covering all these topics. Then how we are going to determine amount 500 mg of this sample is present or not. So based on this quantitative estimation, you can perform this estimation using various analytical methods. Then you can identify if this drug is of high quality or not. So based on that, you can determine and approve, or you can say assure the quality of drug substances or pharmaceuticals that we are going to use. So this was it from this slide. The British Pharmacopoeia and US Pharmacopoeia, we will discuss it in next lecture also. So thank you for this, you can say, attending this lecture. Now I am going to introduce our new speaker, the Dr. Shamsher Singh. Dr.